Have you ever made a situation a lot worse than it needed to be? Have you noticed that we are often too focused on what is going wrong and not focused enough on what is right? This is part of human nature, but if we have the right mindset or we choose a positive attitude, we can turn any situation better in the blink of an eye. Sometimes, when our expectations aren't met, we can get trapped by the false idea that something is a lot worse than it actually is. And for me, it can be hard to get out of that kind of entrapment. In other words, I have found that we tend to generate this kind of suffering from our own minds. Hi, my name is Alex Precor, and I believe that we create our own suffering. Escaping the trap of negative thinking is never easy to do. And of course, there have been many times that I have not realized how I am allowing myself to be trapped. It is easier for us to be negative and focus on the bad than to be a good person and focus on the positive. If we have an impression that something is unpleasant or has bad qualities, we can often create this bias in our minds against it. In fact, we do this all the time. Big or small, this bias affects all of our lives. Last summer, I convinced my mom and dad to send me all the way to Costa Rica for a service and language camp for 2 weeks. They were hesitant, but eventually I persuaded them that it was a fabulous idea. I wanted to go on an adventure where I could work on my Spanish and discover a new place I'd never been. I was super excited to meet all the people in my group, and I was expecting a wonderful experience right up until the moment I was dropped off. I was about to be left behind in a new country with 9 peers and 2 college counselors I had never met. Of course, I'd been the one to sell the idea of this trip to my parents, but when I said goodbye, the reality of my adventure sunk in. I tried to put on a brave face, but by the end of the first day, I was already uncomfortable and crying. So why was I uncomfortable? I had an expectation that I would quickly relate to the peers in my group, but I didn't. There was the girl who bragged about her family's money constantly, the boy who thought it would be funny to try to shock us by doing disgusting things, and the twins from Baltimore who were really gross to share a bathroom with. None of these people were the new friends I'd been looking forward to meeting. The idea of spending a lot of time in tight quarters in a new place with them felt overwhelming and uncomfortable. Those were the times that I felt very lonely. My solution was to spend the next week isolating myself in my room, crying and not participating in any of the activities. I had convinced myself that the only solution to stop the trip was going home, when in fact it was actually to get to know people and make the best of my trip by immersing myself in the culture and experiences. But I couldn't see that because I had created all these negative thoughts and narrowed my perspective, which caused me a lot of pain. By the second week, my friends and family were fed up with my rigid perspective. I talked to my mom, and she said the only way she'd come to get me if there was an emergency. For a moment, I tried to think of one, but instead, I talked with my only friend who was on the trip with me, and she suggested that since I was going to have to stay for the whole trip, I should make the best of it. I'd had this idea in my mind that the trip was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, when in fact, that wasn't true at all. After accepting that no one was coming to rescue me, I realized that I had to stick it out. So I actively decided to change my mindset. Once I started to make an effort to participate and make friends, I realized I'd been missing out on a trip I was lucky to be on. All because of my self-inflicted negative thoughts. By the second week, I made a choice to shift my thinking and ended up having an awesome time. I'm so grateful my mom forced me to stay and my friend coached me to change my mindset. It made me realize the power of my own thoughts. I learned that just because you think something doesn't make it true. We all have the ability to free ourselves from the mental traps we create simply by changing perspective. In the passage that Tate read for us, we hear that if we focus on the positive, we will be able to live a happier, more joyous life. When the passage says, if anything is excellent or worthy of praise, think about those kinds of things. This directly tells you that it is right to focus on the positive, not the negative. Later, when the passage says, then God's peace will watch over your hearts and minds, it describes that the benefit of focusing on the positive is a feeling of harmony and safety in the hands of God. the kind of peace that comes from accepting God's words. Not only is this belief a part of Christianity, but is also in many other religions, especially Buddhism. Buddhism is based on the teachings of the Buddha, and the foundation of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths make up the essence of the Buddhist teachings, and they are: life always involves suffering, the cause of suffering is wanting things to be different, the end of suffering comes when we accept things the way they are, and the way to end suffering is to practice acceptance. The Noble Truths talk about how we can escape suffering caused by our own expectations by letting go and living our life to the fullest, without being attached to the idea of life going or being a certain way. They can help us notice when we are overly attached to our expectations, which cause unnecessary suffering. In the end, my trip and my suffering forced me to grow. I am now confident I can have fun, even in unexpected and uncomfortable circumstances. I learned positive self-talk, and when I have negative thoughts, I can remind myself of what I experienced on my Costa Rica trip, that I can turn things around with positivity. I also built flexibility in my thinking and created a new personal philosophy. Maybe the outcome you're not expecting is actually the better one. I'm glad I learned this lesson early in my life because although it takes practice to follow the Four Noble Truths, I know I can choose not to suffer in the future. So join me in letting go of expectations and making the best of whatever adventures life sends your way. Thank you.